Unison's always been, at the forefront of raising issues like the Holocaust, discrimination, victimisation, fascism, and I got interested because a colleague in the North West region had contacted me about running a Scottish study tour programme to Auschwitz. I think having the story of Jane Haining, we use that in the study tour programme, I think it helps focus people's attentions to how ordinary people just doing ordinary things can be caught up in these atrocities. We teach about Jane's story before we go, and then when we're there we have a memorial service to Jane Haining, and the guides in Auschwitz-Birkenau camp also will talk about Jane while we're there and what they know about her time in the camp as well. We hold that in the women's camp B at Block 9 where she was held during her time in Birkenau. We have a wreath laying ceremony and everybody individually lays a rose to commemorate Jane. And we have a moment's silence. I think that's important because somewhere in Birkenau our Jane's remains, her ashes are scattered there. So I think it's very fitting. It's a very fitting tribute to her, to the story. And I think it also allows our delegates to experience a bit more about and feel more about being there in that place and knowing about an individual who was there. I think Jane's story is important for people to learn about the Holocaust. I think it takes people back to a time, within a lifetime that this happened. And I think Jane's story is about service and sacrifice. It's someone, an ordinary person who went about her ordinary day work, caring for children. And Jane's selflessness, she was ordered back by the Church of Scotland and she refused to come because the girls that she was in her care, she felt so strongly a connection to them and she stayed with them. I think it's important that people remember the Holocaust and continue to oppose all forms of discrimination and fascism and genocide. We must stop these things happening, and war is political, and Jane was an ordinary person caught up in that.
The Provost is technically the civic head of Renfrewshire Council. The Provost's role is to engage with the community in the main, also to represent the council and the community at significant community events throughout the year. But Remembrance Sunday is particularly poignant. It's important because we lost a lot of people during the wars, World War I, World War II. So we still have a lot of representation from family members on that day, and it's very, very important that their council recognises the part that their loved ones played in defending the country. It's highly unusual to see a woman's name on a war memorial. It was soldiers who were out in the field and killed who are usually on these memorials. Now that's a proper thing to do, don't get me wrong. They should be honoured in that way, but then so should the women who died in other areas of battle. I think Jane Haining's a wee reminder to all of us about just how horrific things were during the wars, about how dangerous it was, not just in the front line. Life was extremely difficult, and I think the role of women is seriously underestimated. I think Jane Haining's story allows us to teach our younger generations that all people are affected. It's not just people who are wearing uniforms who go away to fight in the war. There are lots of sacrifices made in day-to-day life. Jane Haining's a prime example of that. She was a Scottish woman who gave up everything here to go and do the right thing as she saw it. I think lots of people don't like to talk about the Holocaust even yet. People don't like to address the atrocities that took place during the Holocaust. But I think now, this point in time in the world, is a perfect time to be talking about all of that, about not making the mistakes that we made then. Jane's story is so important for us. We need to use this to educate the young folk.
Jane Haining was born in this village in 1897 in a farmhouse about a mile away from here, from the church. She was the third of several children, 2 daughters who had survived, but she would have had brothers as well who did not survive. And Jane was the 3rd daughter. Her mum died shortly after giving birth to a 4th daughter called Helen, who died after 18 months. So she would have known quite a lot of sadness in her early days. Her older sisters were Alison, the oldest, and then Margaret and Jane. And of course, her father was then on his own to bring up 3 girls. He did get some help and did eventually remarry. And Jane was very fond of Robertina, who was his second wife. Jane was very involved in the church. Her father was an elder of the Free Church. It was called the Craig United Free Church, about a mile in the opposite direction from her home. So on Sunday mornings they would have walked past this place of worship to go to the United Free Church. And Jane loved the Bible stories, and as she grew up into teenage years, she told stories. She was a sort of Sunday school teacher. Jane Haining was an ordinary person from a small village with her own story and her own life. And I think it is surprising that she ended up dying in Auschwitz.
My name's Deirdre McDowell, and Jane Haining is my aunt. She's my mother's sister. And I brought along a picture. I brought this along because it was taken in Dunsker. Now Jane Haining's here in this picture, along with my mother, who also went to this academy. And this was the last picture taken of Jane Haining before she left Scotland.
Jane's story started to be properly integrated into our curriculum from this year, where we took a really big focus on her story and wanted to deliver not one lesson when we're coming up to Holocaust Memorial Day. We wanted to give it the time of day that it deserved. So it was from this year we dedicated 5 to 6 weeks on Jane Haining's story and really covering all aspects of her life before she went to Budapest, what it would have been like when she was there, and then also what ended up happening to her, to really highlight the history and the local community history that we do fortunately have at this school.
In the Jane Haining project, we studied what she did during her life. We did these kind of like memorial things where we either got to write a poem or like draw a picture, and it was like we all did like different things, and it was quite fun to do. I think we all enjoyed it.
War broke out, and Jane and Margaret had left behind their children in Budapest, and they were told not to go back by the Church of Scotland, because Jane was a member of the Church of Scotland, and said, don't go back, war's broken out, it's too dangerous. But Jane would not hear of it. As some of you know the quote, if the children needed her in days of sunshine, how much more would they need her in days of darkness?
I do think a lot of the times when we talk about what happened at the Holocaust and what happened in Auschwitz, it's very blanketed, an experience that happened to all of these people, and you obviously do highlight the heinous conditions, but you don't highlight a lot of the time a lot of these individualised stories within that.
I find her inspirational because she just gave up everything. She didn't do what people would expect her to do. She did what she thought was best for others.
It's important because she was a hero to many Jewish kids who are now alive because she saved them from the Nazis.
The fact that she knew that the kids were going to be in danger and she made sure that they were okay and stayed with them was very inspirational.
Everywhere you look, you can see her legacy and her memory. She's on our Ducks board. We've got a full cabinet, we've got a memorial for her. So it's just important that we're tying the story to her legacy that's everywhere that you look in the school. It was S6 pupils that all came together. They worked with other members of the local community in Dumfries to make a big memorial for Jane Haining. So on it, it's got her number for when she was in Auschwitz. It's got parts of her story there, and they worked to make it out of like wood, so it was craftsmanship that went behind it as well. So my class that I took through the Jane Haining lessons, I took them out to look at it, and the amount you can learn just from looking at that one memorial piece told the story to them. I personally think it's a great memorial piece, very, very impactful.
Thank you all for keeping Jane's memory alive, and it's important that you keep telling the story. And I'm going to leave this picture in the school, and you are going to be custodians of this story, of this picture. You'll be able to explain who these people are and what happened to them.
When she first came to Glasgow, she stayed in digs in Langside, and so she joined Queen's Park Church, which was just round the corner. And then later she moved it sort of into Pollokshields to 4th Street, but still just a walk away from the church. And her interest even then was very much in children. She went to college, first of all, when she first came to Glasgow, and did her business qualification. But she taught in the Sunday school at Queen's Park Church and became the secretary of the Sunday school. After she got her business qualification, she got the job in J&P Coates, and she worked in the counting house, which was the kind of admin and management centre.
I think Jane's experiences working in Coates gave her so much confidence in herself. I mean, she came from a very quiet farmland area, and she was quiet in school, but she managed to take on this role of great responsibility in Coates, and she spent, I'm not sure if it was 10 years there, 10 years. So all that time obviously, made her the person that she became, and even the fact of working with children as well, and she must have realised, I love doing this and I would like to carry on something like this in the future.
She was obviously very bright and kind of went up in the ranks. And eventually she was kind of the right-hand person of the financial director, a man called Mr. Peacock, who valued Jane very highly. She gave up her job in Coates, to the horror of most of her friends and family, and went to domestic science college and got a qualification in, I suppose, catering and all these kind of things. And then she got a job in Manchester in a hostel. And it was when she was there that she saw the advert for the matron of the girls' home in the Church of Scotland School in Budapest. After she'd got the job to go to Budapest, she went to the Church of Scotland College, which was called St. Combs. They trained women mainly for the mission field, and they gave a very practical training in how to live on your own and how to find resources within yourself. And they also got trained in how to run meetings and take minutes and stuff, practical stuff, as well as the spiritual side of it, which was the kind of framework, obviously, of the whole thing.
The school had already been built. It was built in 1910, and this was a school where Jewish girls and Christian girls were studying together, and some of them were living here. And that was her role, was to take care of those who were living here, in a way being their mother.
Itt mesés volt. Otthon éreztük magunkat, semmiféle zavaró körülmény soha nem fordult elő. A tanárok teljesen egyformán viselkedtek velünk szembe, mint a reformátusokkal szemben, mert főleg reformátusok jártak ide. Annak alapján én nem mehettem az általános iskolából középiskolai gimnáziumba. És a gimnázium helyett kerültem én ide, akkor már híre volt a skót polgárinak, hogy mennyire szívesen fogadja az üldözött zsidó gyerekeket.
So you could see that various restrictions were being placed increasingly on the Jews who lived in Hungary, and there was an awareness at the Scottish Mission of that.
Minden osztályba csak egy bizonyos számban, nagyon kis létszámba vettek fel zsidó lányokat a gimnáziumba, a többiek a gimnáziumból kiszorultak. Ez volt a kormánynak a célja, hogy minél kevesebb értelmiségi legyen zsidóból.
There would have always been a concern on Jane's mind when the imminent threat to the safety and life of the girls might occur. That must have been one of the reasons that she came back, because in fact the first time she was urged not to remain here was when she was on leave in Scotland, and her answer to the Church of Scotland was that if the children need me in the days of sunshine, how much more will they need me in the days of darkness? So I think that, first of all, that instruction from the Church of Scotland and her refusal to return, those indicate how things were getting darker here and how she anticipated that to get even worse.
Felejthetetlen megrázó élmény, ami egy életen át elkísér maga, az, ami akkor Magyarországon történt, és amik az elhurcolások, és a Dunába lövések, és minden, ami akkor történt, és ez egy mencsvár volt, ameddig működhetett. Egy biztonságos otthont jelentett.
As far as we know, both anecdotal and documented evidence are that it was precisely her always prioritizing the girls' needs that got her into trouble, so to speak. Because when they came to arrest her, it was not a raid on the school overall. There was no one else taken away on that day. It was only Jane Haining that they came for. She said to the girls that she would be back in time for lunch. Whether she believed that or whether she was trying to protect them from panic, I think we can only speculate. She would have known that things were harsh, but whether she knew that she would never return, I honestly don't know. But they came for her. They took her away, and it's true that she never returned here.
Nagyon megrázó élmény volt, mert valamennyien szerettük és tiszteltük az itt tanítókat, tanárainkat. Nagyon, ma is könnybe lábad a szemem.
One of the things I like to look to in Jane is how she herself lived out her faith. And what I see is that for her, to care for others, even those who might be labeled as different, was a basic instinctive expression of how she lived out her Christian faith. And I believe that's an example for us today and has particular relevance when some people are using Christian faith as a justification for nationalism and excluding others, whereas for her, it was just the opposite.
Ritka érzés az emberbe, ahol szeretetet kapott, akkor.
There are a couple of reasons it's important to remember Jane's sacrifice. One reason is that in times of difficulty, when we see people being persecuted, victimized in a variety of ways, it's good for us to look at the example of those who did stand up. It's also good because, in addition to setting an example, it's also a part of the story that we see in a brutal regime how anyone who resisted would ultimately be targeted. So if anyone ever thinks that they're not the initial target group and therefore they are safe, then they simply don't know enough of how history has taught us.
És hihetetlen, hogy a mai politikai helyzet sok országban olyan, hogy a jobb oldal jut érvényre, és reszketve gondolnak azok, akik az előzőt túlélték, hogy mit hoz a holnap.
Well, there were 8 charges. One of them, the last one, was that she had been involved in politics, and that was the only one she denied. She said she'd always been far too busy to be involved in politics. She was accused of listening to the BBC. She was accused of visiting British prisoners of war in Hungary. She was accused of weeping when she had to sew yellow stars on the clothing of her girls. And she answered all the questions by saying, all the things you're saying are perfectly legal in Hungary. Obviously, I have British visitors. I'm British. Oh, she was accused of working with Jews. She said, well, obviously I work with Jews. I'm in a school where... And she didn't try to deny anything except that she'd been involved in political activity. The huge majority of people who went to Auschwitz, over, I think, 99%, never even got into the camp. They were walked from the train along a long platform to the gas chambers, basically. Jane actually didn't live in what most people think of as Auschwitz. She was a political prisoner, which was a slightly different category, and I think she was in the old part, but I don't think the conditions were much better. She would be crammed into a cell with other people. They got hardly anything to eat, and most people who died not from actual murder died of starvation. And I think there was no washing facilities, toilets, one for I don't know how many 100 people, but the sanitation and everything was terrible. And if they were kept alive, they were to work, and the work was very, very hard labour. A lot of people say the worst thing about the camp was the cruelty of the guards. They were always shouting, always chasing them from one place to another. They could kill them at a whim, and people did. So there was constant terror and cruelty, which, psychologically must have been absolutely devastating to everybody. And this whole stripping away of your identity, hair shaved off, tattoo in the arm, these awful striped clothes that they got. They were degraded and humiliated, and that was deliberate. The official story from the Germans was that she had died of what they called intestinal catarrh, diarrhea of some description, and that she had died in hospital. And they delivered a death certificate with that information on it to the mission in the middle of August. Jane having died actually in the middle of July. But it was quite common for the Germans to send out these kind of things. Again, it was all part of keeping the lie going that the death camps were sort of reasonable. Discovered, an official record of Jane being moved from old Auschwitz to Birkenau 2 days before her death. The purpose of that being really because that was where the gas chamber was. The Hungarian authorities are certain now that she went to the gas chamber, and that seems plausible to me.
The first Saturday in July is an important day for Paisley, where we commemorate the victory of the weavers over the manufacturers in 1856. And Unison's involvement is it was one of the earliest workers' movements in the United Kingdom, and we're very proud to host part of this event and to help support to commemorate that victory. This is where people came together, the weavers came together to get money for payment for the small shot, which is the thread, the weft thread that binded the rest of the fabric together, and the manufacturer refused to pay it. So the first banner we have is our own branch banner, and on that it says "Many threads, one fabric," to commemorate the small shot and the victory of the weavers. And the second banner in the parade today is, and the flags today celebrated Jane Haining. We commemorate Jane for her time here in Paisley in the thread mills, and the work that she did at Ferguson Mill here.
It made us feel very proud, and it was a great honour to be here. Every year some members of our family come over, so it was our turn this year, and it was just very nice to be part of the parade and hold the banner with Jane Haining's photograph. It was really great to see all the children around the town of Paisley picking up flags which have her photograph on it, and again so that she's remembered for her actions and what she did and the sacrifice that she carried out.
There is a link to the thread mills, obviously, and the weavers and where Jane worked. So I think it's important. I think it will be a part of Small Shot going forward. But I think also it's to raise that story and awareness for generations that are coming up. And, you know, we're delighted to the family with us carrying the banner. They're very proud to do that. It's their relative, and obviously for us to be able to tell that story.
So the Girl Daughter of Scotland song, I'd written that to celebrate and champion the women of Scotland and girls as well, and to kind of promote gender equality. And I wanted to, you know, kind of name check great women of Scottish history within it, to kind of almost like get them to echo through time, and for people to, you know, to add some sort of awareness to who these people were, and to show that we really do, you know, kind of stand on the shoulders of giants. You know, we've had things like Schindler's List, so we're all very aware of Oscar Schindler, and, you know, Jane is Scotland's Schindler. She's someone who sacrificed her own life for the children in her care during, you know, one of the darkest periods in the world when, you know, evil was prevailing. And I think that it's almost like, you know, being courageous and brave, it doesn't have to be loud, it can be quiet and loving and caring and consistent. And I think that's what she represents. She really is a heroine. I got an email from Jane's niece to tell me she'd heard it. It'd been passed to her via the Church of Scotland. And then beyond that, then obviously Unison asked me they flew the family over for the Small Shot Day in Paisley. And they got me to sing at the main stage, and then got me to do a kind of private performance for the family. And I can honestly say, singing for Jane's nieces and family, it's one of the greatest honours of my life.
We've marched 1,000 miles for hard-fought race through history. We've played our hand, the great woman of this land. Heroism we have seen, Mary Barber's Reign Army, Jane Haining, righteous among nations. 'Cause we are doctors, lawyers, mothers, footballers, first ministers, poet laureate, we're on the move, and I'm telling you, the glass ceiling's gone, we're coming through. Rise up, eyes up, take the stage, play your game, don't be afraid. You're a work of art, Air Jones of Arc, always be proud of who you are. And girl, you gotta hold your head up high, don't let this moment pass you by. You can be anything you believe you can be, girl. This world is waiting just for you. Go on and shine and live your truth. You can be anything you believe you can be. Anything you believe you can be, girl.
When the Scottish system first approached Yad Vashem in Israel, they said no, she was there as a missionary, and we regard conversion as another attempt to get rid of Jews. And you can, I think the phrase was something like, you can scarcely expect us to award her for doing that. But then the people at Queen's Park didn't accept that, and were also in touch with the Jewish community in Glasgow. There was a woman called Judith Tankle. She made representations on, you know, saying that her community welcomed the idea of Jane Haining being honoured for what she had done. The evidence from all the former pupils was overwhelmingly that she had never discriminated, that the school itself had been founded to educate Jewish and Christian girls together so that they would respect and appreciate each other's cultures, and Jane had been a big part of that. And eventually her credentials were accepted, and she was awarded the Righteous Among the Nations medal, and her name is on the wall of remembrance at Yad Vashem in Israel.
The mural came about after a discussion with people in the branch, Jane's family and some other people connected with the story, including Grimshire's Provost Lorraine Cameron. And we decided on a mural, so a decision was taken to commission Maiden Paisley, who will design the mural. It's going to be placed at Shuttle Street, just round from the Small Shot Cottages. So it's quite a fitting tribute, I think, to be in that location. And it will tell the story of Jane's story, which I think is important out of the whole thing.
I met up with Jane's family, some of Jane's family, and they were giving me information, and we took notes of things that Jane Haining, they would like to see in the mural, but you've got to condense that, because there was so much about Jane that there was no wall big enough to incorporate everything, so you have to condense it all to try and get that story.
It's a homage to someone who's died in Auschwitz, so it was quite challenging to bring a human, positive, optimistic element into the mural.
It was initially requested, that we got the image of Jane Haining reading to the children in, so we've included that. I think that's an important image.
Yeah, that's almost the centrepiece of her. I think it's a fine location. I think it's a well trodden location, so I think it'll be well seen. So it's not like our previous murals where we've had to climb up on cherry pickers 3 floors up, painting at the top of chimney stacks and stuff like that, which was a little bit scary if you suffer from vertigo.
We took photographs of it and then laid it out to see what it would look like, a rough idea when it gets to the actual wall. And this is a black and white version of the mural.
It's a really modern way of giving out a message, sending a message, telling a story. And I think the mural is just wonderful. And I think its location is perfect also, because it's right in the heart of that old historical part of Paisley, which Jane, I have no doubt, would have visited many times working in Paisley.
One of the things we were keen at the very start of this project was to walk the steps of Jane Haining, to learn about her from her birth in Lockenhead Farm in Dunscar, and to see the places she worshipped, where she went to education, how she ended up in Paisley, and then Edinburgh, and in Hungary, and then finally in Birkenau. So I think it was important for that to happen, and meeting people along the way who could recollect different things or tell you different bits of the story has been important for us as a trade union. But also I think having the family to go alongside some of that has been really important, their experience and their knowledge. And I mean, the family have been absolutely tremendous in all of this. They've shared every piece of information that they've got, every photograph, every story they know. And the people in Dunscore are exceptionally proud of Jane. And you can see that, when you go into Dunscore community and they welcome everybody that comes to learn about Jane at the Heritage Centre. It's been really important. And I think it has made it more emotional for us who are a part of the project. But also I think it helps to relate to just how many people Jane touched. Jane probably could never envisaged how her story would be told beyond that, but I'm sure she would think it was fitting that we still talk about her story, and in particular those round about her who she cared and loved.